So I last really kind of showed the complexity, of things going on with Bush and the war on terror, and going back to all of this. And so, hopefully, if I can kind of recap again, here's what I'm saying. In the Middle East, I think that there's been a kind of political power gap. I mean, and ultimately, the U.S. government and other Western nations have supported um, many very oppressive regimes in the Middle East and North Africa and other places, um, if they're favoring our interests. In the past, we knew our interest was if it was going to be a threat to communism, and now, what's our interests? Why support? Why support Saudi Arabia now, or Israel, or uh, countless other regimes, and be involved in certain conflicts just because we like one side over the other? I mean, what is it? Now, I realize, by the way, that I'm giving you a lot of kind of biasness going on here. But let me go back and kind of just justify what I'm trying to do. You know, um, I've had professors who really kind of justify that are more hawkish, you would say, and supporting the logic of U.S. foreign policy from everything from the Cold War till now in the war on terror. And I respect some of their arguments. I mean, in terms of the fact that people are thinking through stuff. I think it's fair to say that many of you, no matter what your politics are, even if you've been in the military or whatever, haven't really been exposed to a lot of this information, or you haven't been able to. Well, let me rephrase this just to say, would we agree that mainstream media doesn't really address the origins of how our modern life is why things are the way that they are right now? And when you study this, you kind of have to draw some conclusions, right? You have to find sort of logic. So I feel like, just to say that from the left or the right or whichever way, I hope that what you're seeing is that when I've discussed why the U.S. would, for example, support radical Islamic militants during the Cold War years. I mean, Brzezinski, many U.S. policy leaders to this day justify that, as said we were doing everything we could to get rid of the Soviet Union, and we feel comfortable that we did everything we needed to, and that was the right thing to do. Of course, then there's the what next question. So even if we can agree about that, then that's the kind of complexity of where we're at. And what I've kind of wanted to do is also break you out of the Democrat versus Republican thing. I want this not to be seen as a liberal or leftist kind of thing. I'm using sources that are kind of seen in like some of these videos I've shown you are more on the liberal left leaning side. But unfortunately, I find them to be one of the few, I'm trying to find the sources of people who are addressing some of the complexities and the problems of where we've got to now, okay? And so, again, this is not also a disrespect to people in service, and it's not to be anti-American, but I want to leave this last section. I want you to feel a little uncomfortable. I want you to feel a little uncomfortable in the sense that maybe I want you to feel like, hey, I live in a great nation. It's a complex world. But, there's a lot for us to be thinking about and talking about as Americans that maybe we haven't. Maybe we've been asking the wrong questions, or maybe what's being brought up is not right. I mean, Hillary Clinton, when it comes to foreign policies, is got the same position as many on the Republican side. And Bernie Sanders is running is got a better in the sense of less hawkish. But other than Bernie Sanders, I would argue that Hillary Clinton, Kasich, Cruz, Trump, they're not that different. Obama said he was going to change things. He didn't really change things. He did some things, but I put this up here because there's a controversy. I'm just going to throw another last clip on drone strikes. Obama was picked by many people to get rid of the Bush years. There was a kind of disillusionment with Bush. Even my friends who were very pro-Bush and pro-war with Iraq, even some people I knew that were in the military, were really over it by the end. Mainly due to the fact that a lot of the reasons for the war ended up proving to be false, and things didn't go as they were said they were going to go, and there was this disillusionment. And then Obama comes in, and he sounds like he's going to change things, and he helps overthrow Gaddafi in Libya, which we're not going to have time to go through, and kind of makes Libya look just pretty much like Iraq. Destabilizes another part of the world, which also creates more potential for terrorism, and then has a very inconsistent policy in Syria that also seems to create more chaos with the aid of Saudi Arabia as well. And one of my arguments is that if you see things that's going on under Obama that bothers you, and you see things that happen under Bush that bothered you, you should be bothered by both. In fact, there's a lot that they had. There's more in common between Bush and Obama when it comes to foreign policy actions than many people want to admit, I think. I mean, feel free to leave a comment with me and tell me why I'm wrong. Okay, but that's my position until convinced otherwise. Now, on other policies, yes, there's maybe some difference, especially domestic, maybe even on spending. But ultimately, we're in a really precarious place right now where Americans are not sure where our civil liberties belong, what rights the state should have to protect us, and we're fearful, right? Look, terrorism is real. There's real enemies. There's people blowing themselves up, killing people in France, Belgium. They still want to attack us here. But then what's causing this? A lot of this is, all coming. I mean, we can see where all this has come from, right? It's not out of a context. It's within a certain context, okay? And, our government has lodged ourselves into the Middle East, basing on this idea that things that we're doing are supposed to make us safer. It's supposed to create a safer world for us and everybody else. Well, is it? Is this how do we qualify what's going on? And especially we're going into to now the 21st century with U.S. history, talking about digital age. We had the issue with Apple and the phones and terrorists, government trying to break in. What are the rights of private citizens, and what role should technology play, and how much responsibility does Google have or other organizations to give information to the government at our expense? What about killing of what about a citizen who seems to go terrorist, goes into another country? We have the Constitution says you have a right to a trial. Well, someone seems to be committing a crime. Do we have a right to execute them or not on the spot? If so, then do we not have a right to a trial? Or what changes that? All these kind of questions coming up, right? It's a very, very complex world we live in. Very, very, very complex world. And, we got here from the Cold War till now, and I do think, looking at this as a historian, that we're not being led by puppet masters or necessarily people who have a strong grip on this, but there's a certain amount of confusion about the what next phase of history and the role of the U.S. government in the world, and what our relationship is to the world, right? And what the law and security means for us, okay? And I think this is so important to have these kind of discussions, especially with so many of our loved ones also fighting overseas. And with the escalation of ISIS, I didn't have time to go over cover that. I wanted to actually kind of maybe put it into context for you to actually see, oh gosh, ISIS may have been a product of war. So if war creates these terrible groups, is more war going to actually end the problem? See, this is not me talking as like a kind of oh, excuse me. Well, there you go, right in my lecture. All right. This isn't about being a weak dove or saying, oh, naive, let's hug the world. I do think it's very reasonable, though, to ask, what's making, are bombs and wars necessarily making us secure? Is it stabilizing the region, or is it making it just crack open? And, and I also hope you understand this. I didn't really talk about Islam. I talked about Islamic fundamentalists and fighters and terrorists. I believe, and I'm very well studied in Islamic law, that and this is just my opinion here. I think that when people try to study Islam and wonder if it's compatible with the West and all these things, all the factors that I just told you is, to me, where we got to where we're at. And as you see, the U.S. government has been quite on friendly terms with many extremely religious Islamic governments. The people who are attacking are mad about the arrangement of the way the world looks, and Islam is an ideology they've wrapped onto. And I guess what I'm trying to point out is that, the Vietnamese were communists when we were fighting them, but remember, we thought we were fighting communists, and instead we were fighting Vietnamese. In other words, the Vietnamese were fighting as nationalists, and we were caught up on the idea of communism. And what I'm trying to propose to you is this idea that maybe that it's not just about Islam, but it's about geopolitics. It's about this long durée of our foreign policy and people living in failed states that don't have much to offer, and large communities coming into the West that with also not necessarily like fully integrated. It's all jarbled together. It's all jarbled together, and it's more of a big geopolitical mess than questioning whether or not that a particular ideology can be fit into modern Western values. And so that's going to be my case. I'll stand by. Many of you will disagree. Many people do disagree with me. That's just my opinion. And again, feel free to even call me up and discuss this if you want to. But I'm going to end it here. So many things that I could have went into the historic aspect of having the first non-white president, Obama. I'm going to play the crash course to kind of end it with the Obama presidency, which is historically significant. We cannot deny. So whether you like Obama or not, he made history by being the first non-white president. Whether we like Hillary Clinton or not, if she got elected, she'd be the first woman president. That's historical, regardless of whether we like the policies that they have or not. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to end it there, and then I'm going to end the last video from a music video clip that was played right after 9/11. It's very heartfelt by a country musician. But he definitely sings a song admitting and talking about not knowing, about kind of how we got to where we're at. So I want you to reflect on the sentiment of the song that I end my lectures on in light of what we read and what you've just watched, and to think deeply. And, I hope that you find that you're not just feeling doom and gloom from what you've watched, but you're going to be a much more serious thinker and come into the topic of what's going on in the world and with U.S. history in a more thoughtful way. And this is where I'm totally biased to say that I think that CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC and all those have destroyed, they've created much of this problem because it's all sound bites. No explanation, no context. You don't really get anything but other than a liberal bias or a conservative bias, which doesn't really tell us a lot about what's really going on. That's just my opinion as well. Actually, I think it's a fact, but whatever. Any case, yeah. So, I watch those newses too. I watch those things as well to kind of keep up to date on what's going on and whatever. So guys from the Duck Dynasty get invited on to talk about their thoughts about Iraq, and I want to poke things in my eye. What can I say? Anyways, all right. That's it. And if you need anything, just give me a call.